back on the 80s at 8. I'm Harry Lipsea. It's exciting when we can bring people from the 80s on. And we've had a lot of great musical artists come and join us. But now we have an actor and a musical artist today, and I'm so excited to have him. Mr. Courtney Gains, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. Yes, there's two of me. You can't see me right now, but there's actually two of me. One is a musician and one's the actor in the room.
I love it. I love it, man. And what's so cool on the acting side of things? What's so cool to me, Courtney, is there's a lot of actors that you can say they're known for this. Well, you've done so many projects that meant a lot to people. So I think a lot of people know you from Children of the Corn, while others are Can't Buy Me
Sure,
Love or Home Sweet
sure.
Alabama. And to me, that speaks to your body of work. And what does it mean to be known for a number of different projects?
Yeah, I think I am most proud of that, right? This would be my 40th year in the business. Is that crazy or what?
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, so Children of the Corn came out in booked the job. Booked the job in '83, came out in '84. So next year will be the 40th anniversary of Children of the Corn. But yeah, so that movie had such a big splash that I wasn't ready for that. It was very overwhelming, to be honest. But I knew that I could be pigeonholed into that role at that point, and so I made a very conscious effort to, in the '80s, my '80s run, to not play the same role twice. And that ended up, in the long run, ended up being a really good thing because I ended up having, like, as you said, a nice body of work in several genres. Showed I could do comedy, different things. And I think that really bode well for me in terms of having a long-term career.
And one thing I don't think people know much, and maybe know as much, is that you are an accomplished musician and you've been doing this for a long time. And it sounds like you've been part of bands. Talk about what it's your kind of relationship with music and how long you've been performing musically as well.
Yeah, so yeah, that's I call it my side hustle, right? I don't even know if it's a side hustle. Maybe it's a hobby. I don't know. But so I started taking acting lessons and music lessons at the same time, which was 13 years old. But I was very clear that acting was what I wanted to do as a profession. And I got much more help in that regard, where I studied. A guy named Virgil Fry was my mentor. He became my manager, helped break me into the business. All those things came into play. I was always just doing music because I really enjoyed it. And what I really, really like is writing. But so along the way, I just kept chipping at it. The first band I really had in LA that was cool in the late '80s was part of the coffee house music scene. While there was metal going on the Strip in LA, there was a whole coffee house unplugged scene that was going on off the Strip. Matter of fact, that's how the unplugged thing happened. On MTV, Spooky had ran this one coffee house that we were a big part of, and then we were on the video he used to submit to MTV that got him on MTV. I don't know if you remember him. He broke the whole grunge sound.
Yeah.
And he was wearing like Soundgarden shirts before like anybody knew what they were. And he pitched them the idea of an unplugged thing, but he wanted to do a more unknown acts concept.
Wow.
And they took the idea and then just used big bands, which was great. But he really got pissed off because they sold this idea and kind of perverted it. And he ended up leaving MTV. I thought he was just a fantastic VJ. And he was in New York, and he walked right from there down to audition for the Who the Tommy Who Tommy thing on Broadway, and got it, and like took off and was doing that for like 6 years. So guy has a very interesting story. But yeah, we were part of this unplugged scene in LA. So that was the first soiree into playing. And then my next band was really a band called Ripple Street that I had for about 10 years. Up until recently, we even put out some singles last year. And then recently I decided to break off and do my own three-piece band where I play in Ripple Street I play guitar. In this band I play bass and sing.
Nice.
And
And I was going to say, you put out an acoustic album, correct? Was that in 2020 or 2021?
Yeah, started tracking it in 2020 and put it out in 2021. And what happened with that was, like everybody else during the pandemic, you take a look, it forces you to look within and go, okay, like life could be short. What is it you haven't done you want to do? And what really came through was the music. I've been writing for years, and I had a lot of stuff I hadn't tracked yet, but the conversation was just simply the cost of getting in the studio, right? And just the pressure I feel in the studio too, like you're trying to sing and find a groove, and you're like, man, every minute is costing me money. It's not very conducive to creativity. And what I found out, again, going down the rabbit hole when everybody had time on their hands in 2020, was that technology had come a long way, and you could buy a relatively cheap home studio to at least do most of your tracking. And that opened the door to the floodgates. And I put out that 5-song EP called Acoustic Gains Volume 1. And then the next thing was putting out this album now, Safe Haven, which is a 6-song EP that I tracked most of it here, and except for the drums, which you really have to go to the studio. There's just no way around it.
Yep.
And it's so complicated to mic it. But it's really freed me up to be able to start putting out music. And this record, Safe Haven, got picked up by a local a record label called Fake Fangs Records, which is where you got to get it. You got to go to fakefangs.com. It's not being on Spotify or YouTube or anything like that. You got to go there direct. The cool thing is you can listen to the whole record 3 times. So you can hear the whole deal. If you like it, you can either get a digi download, or you can buy. We have a limited run of CDs, which I love, old school physical copy. And we just extended it till the 12th. You can get a personally signed one. If you pre-order it now, between now and the 12th, you can get a personally inscribed CD from me. So
Wow.
we've been selling those pretty good so far. The pre-orders have been good.
That's awesome. And can you talk a little bit about the name? I just think Safe Haven is such a cool name, and I think it has a significance. Talk a little bit about why that's the name of your EP.
Yeah, I like the title as well, and all the 6 songs in this particular record, like the Acoustic Gains record was more personal, more self-reflective. This one's storytelling for sure, and it's basically talking about things that I find absurd, like perhaps one of them's called Bills in Space. It's about the billionaire space race. It's kind of a surfy rock song that I think the billionaire space race is the biggest ego trip on the planet. I keep saying I would like for those 3 great minds to get together and solve homelessness and world hunger. That's what I would like.
For sure.
But Safe Haven was the only song on there that I wrote. Actually, when I picked up the bass, that song, the riff that's in there, came out of that bass line, was what started the whole thing. And I think, again, it was during the pandemic and coming through the pandemic, and I think it had sort of double meanings, how important it was for people. There was people on during a pandemic, there was people on the streets that had no safe haven. They had nowhere to go. Think about that, right? But also, music is my safe haven. That's one of the places I'm able to express myself honestly. So I think it really has that double meaning. And I think that all people need a safe haven, whatever that is. If my son does jujitsu, when he comes out of there, he's a different person. He's always so much lighter. That's his safe haven. I think we all need a safe haven,
For sure. And that's why I asked, because the song Safe Haven, when I listened to it, really connected with me. And I just,
nice.
That whole thing of having a place to escape or a place that just feels like home has always been so interesting to me.
Right. We all need a place to escape, right? Whatever, we all do, whatever that means. Some people it's watching movies, right? Like you were talking about some of the movies I've been on, like The Burbs, for example. When I started doing conventions, I had no idea that movie had such a cult following. And there are people who, like, when they're depressed, like, that's the movie they watch. You're just like, wow, I can't believe this movie has that much impact in somebody's life. But that made it worth doing right there in my book, right? Like, even there's one person on the planet that's the movie that lifts their spirits, what a blessing, right?
Oh, for sure. And like you said, music is a safe haven for a lot of people. And my question to you is, what were some of your kind of early influences musically? And since it is an 80s show, did you have any 80s music that kind of influenced you?
Yeah, I'm definitely more into 60s and 70s music than 80s, but there's obviously some, in hindsight, there's just tons of great 80s bands. But when it first started happening with like the sensonic drums and all that stuff, I was like, what is this? I don't like this, I like John Bonham. That's what I like.
Nice. Nice.
But but to answer your question, I think, 80s wise, I think it's just remarkable what Guns N' Roses accomplished. They only put out a few records in that run, but they completely sort of changed the whole metal landscape by Slash going back onto the Les Paul and really playing more rock and roll than Eddie Van Halen Flash. Now, I'm not knocking Eddie Van Halen. He's a genius, okay? He's a genius. We all wish we could play like Eddie Van Halen, but everybody was imitating him at that point. And Slash came along and slowed it back down, and it was a whole different thing. But so, God, influence for me is always a strange question because I don't try to write in any way by anything that I did influence me. In other words, in terms of like, oh, I want to sound like that because I'm smart enough to know I can't like sound like them, right? Like I'm never
Okay.
going to sound like Led Zeppelin, right? So don't
Yep.
try. So, but the influences I had were very wide and varied. One of the influences I think that really seeped in there was I grew up in Chicano neighborhoods in Los Angeles where oldies, a station called KRLA, was very very popular in my neighborhood. So you would hear all the oldies and songs that Carol Kane wrote and stuff like that, and I think that seeped into my subconscious in terms of learning how to write structure in a song. Because I think that the structure of that '50s era is the best. And one of my favorite all time songs is Aaron Neville singing "Tell It Like It Is." That
Oh,
song absolutely kills me. Like puts a tear in my eye. You
oh,
know,
it's awesome. And
and
it's funny
his
you mentioned that. A couple weeks ago we played One Fine Day by Carole King, and just the song structure of those kind of classics, as well as Tell It Like It Is, the song structure, and it's incredible.
Right. So I think that like that's what's seeped in was sort of the ideas of a song structure and writing. A lot of my stuff is, not, 10 minutes long, and it's not like I'm thinking like, oh, write a 3.5 minute song because that's commercial. It's just that's what comes out. Right. So I think that there's been some influence there. And another person I've been talking about a lot lately, who's somebody I really admire is Janice Ian. And
Oh, nice.
I think her record Between the Lines is one of the best records of all time. For me, when I was a teenager and the loneliness that comes up with teenagehood, at least it did for me, I felt she captured that like nobody else. I felt she really, when you're like lying there in your bedroom in the dark, feeling isolated and whatever. I felt like her whole record was like that, and I had a chance to finally see her play, and she would not play anything from that record except at 17 because she
Yep.
literally said it was too painful. I was
Wow.
bummed, but I also really understood and respected it because that's what really came across on that record. She's holding some workshops nowadays, and I've been debating on whether to go do it because on one hand, I mean, I think it would be an incredible experience, and I'm sure I would learn a lot. But on the other hand, I just don't want to in any way have one of my idols destroyed because I admire her so much. I don't want to get mad at her, if she does something to piss me off because I really, really respect her a lot.
For sure. For sure. And it's so funny because growing up, it was always a song that if I was in a group of people, like at 17 or some of our other, I might make a joke, but you'd
Of
go home and
course.
it's like, it's such a guilty pleasure and they're great songs.
Of
She's
course they
great,
of course
but
people
you
would
do
have to make a joke about it. It was too uncomfortable, too
exactly.
too uncomfortable. But then of course I got influences like like Zeppelin and Rush and Floyd and all that stuff too that I really, really admire. I mean, I think the thing I feel about like Led Zeppelin is like they're in a way they're so popular, but in a way I feel they're almost underrated at the same time. It's like I feel like they have more street cred than maybe people realize. Because I mean, their records, the way they put them together, they're not concept records, but they really flow. They're not just 10 songs. They're 10 songs that go together, and I think that that's not as easy as people think.
Absolutely. Last question for you on the music front. Can we play one of your songs on the show? Is that
I would
okay?
love it. I would love it.
What would you like us to play today?
Well, I think since we talked about the title track, "Safe Haven," let's go with that.
Sounds good. You want to introduce it again? We're talking with Courtney Gains, and this is a song off of his EP, Safe Haven, which is available on, is it fakefangs.com?
Yes, fakefangs.com. Yes, Fake Fang Records.
Perfect. Do you want to introduce the song, and we'll come back and talk about some of your work in the 80s?
Sure. Well, this is Courtney Gains, and you're listening to my EP title track, "Safe Haven."
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. That was Courtney Gains, musician, and that was his title track off of his EP, Safe Haven. And thank you so much for sharing that with us, Courtney Gains.
Well, thank you for playing it. Thank you for playing it. Now, I don't know how much time you have left, but this is an '80s show, so if you want to hit me with some '80s questions, movies, please do.
Let's do it. Oh man, this is a dream come true. I and I'll tell you what, when I think of you, we air in a town called Mayville, North Dakota. When I think of you, it's now closed, but it was a video store and a pizza place, and I think of you for two reasons. they had something called 5 for 5, where you get five movies that weren't new releases for $5 for 5 days. And Can't Buy Me Love was in that. I would say once a month that was part of the rotation. I That's one of my favorite
Uh,
movies growing up. But then I have a group of friends. We would always sit in back and order our pizza, and there is a poster, and that's why I get offended when people call you a character actor, because I looked at your face on the Memphis Belle poster many, many times, and it's like, dude, uh,
I think I
character
lost
actors
you.
don't character actors don't get their faces on posters. So
Yes, that's true.
so Memphis Belle is, when I think of you, I think of that pizza place and video rental place, because between Memphis Belle and Can't Buy Me Love, you have a big part of my childhood. So thank you for that.
That's awesome. You made me think about, so this was kind of a special moment for me. Was so my father was a laborer at Warner Brothers Studios, like just like
Oh,
basic labor. And he passed away a couple years before that movie came out. But like at the Warner Brothers lot, there's these giant posters that they paint by hand, on the side of the building. And Memphis Belle made the cut and got on there, and I was just, that to me was like, wow, for my father being a laborer to his son being on a poster in front of Warner Brothers, it just didn't really get any better than that for me.
that's incredible. That's incredible. So let's go a little bit by the movie in the 80s, if that's okay. First, Children of the Corn, and I'm actually from Nebraska, or I'm living in Nebraska at the moment, so it's kind of funny that I'm talking to Malachi from Nebraska.
That's
But
right. Be careful now. Be careful going out in the cornfield.
oh, I know it. And I'm actually a sports reporter, and sometimes I cover six-man football games right by cornfields. So every once in a while, I think you're going to come out. Uh,
Exactly. How could you not? Yeah, I will forever be associated with a food. There's no
yeah,
getting around.
exactly. So one question I've always had about that movie and that role was, for your first role, how difficult was it to try to find something to kind of relate to Malachi? Because you seem like such a down to earth, awesome guy. Like, that has to be difficult to try to find part of yourself to relate to a character with so much evil.
Well, that's the job, right? Is to find a way to hone in on whatever the mood, if you want, for lack of a better word, instead of feeling of a character. I didn't think of him. I thought more about what he was. Right, he was the number two guy in line, and he was the enforcer. Right, so
Yep.
he's the guy that he took out the policeman, so he's a pretty bad dude in his own right.
Yeah.
And he keeps the laws by fear. That's what he
Yep.
does, right? So, but I'll tell you, when my dad watched the movie, it's funny, I'm talking about my dad a couple of times here. Um, his comment when we saw it in a movie theater on Hollywood Boulevard, because there wasn't even a red carpet for that movie. And his comment, I thought at the time he meant I was a good actor. He said, "I had no idea you had so much anger inside you." I thought he meant like you just said, like, "Oh, good actor," but I realized years later that's not what he meant.
That's cool.
I think and so you say, where did it come from? I think it came from growing up in tough neighborhoods,
Okay.
and I think that stuff was in there, and that movie was just a vehicle to unleash it.
Wow. Very interesting. Yeah, and still a movie that, what's so funny about a lot of your movies is, I think you almost call them cult classics, from the standpoint of the people that love them so much. Like, when I've talked about interviewing you, there's been a couple people on the people that love Children of the Corn. It is just such a passionate subject for them.
Yes, yes. I would say, again, I was using that calling street cred. Like there are people who have, critics and that kind of popularity, and then there's people who have street cred, and then there's, a few people like a Malcolm McDowell who have both. You know what I
Yep.
mean? Like everybody knows he's great, but he's also, the industry wants to hire him as well, because he's marketable or whatever. But yeah, I feel like I have a lot more street cred than I may have commercial cred. And I take pride in that. I take pride in it. That there, like you said, there are people out there who may not be, it may not be all the most mainstream people, and I may not be the most mainstream actor, but there are people who are, who do know my work and who are passionate about some of the films I've been in. And for me, and that's what I learned doing conventions the last 15 years.
That's great. And one movie that is on your filmography that doesn't get a lot of talk about these days, but I ask because the director is someone that I really, really enjoy, is Lust in the Dust. Talk a little bit about that, and because Eating Raoul is one of my favorite movies of all time. Like, and
Yes,
it,
I
oh,
just knew I knew that was the movie you were going to say. I just knew it.
what was it like
Uh,
being in a film directed by Paul Bartle?
Paul is one of the nicest directors I've ever worked for, and you know you'd be doing your thing and you couldn't help but catch him out of the corner of your eye because he wouldn't just be sitting behind a monitor, you know, sort of not knowing how he feels about it. He'd be watching and he'd be smiling, like almost laughing, like but not laughing out loud, you know. And he was just so there, engaged and rooting for you, that it couldn't help but inspire confidence. And because there are sometimes you work with directors and you cannot tell what they think at all, or they give very little feedback, and that creates insecurity, you know. So he was just an absolute cheerleader, and I got to work with him in a film that he was an actor in too. I'm trying to remember the name of it, right before he passed, and it was it'll come to me. It was just so great to get to see him again and thank him, you know, and tell him how much I actually enjoyed working with him. So I was really glad, especially then, you know, literally months later he was gone. So it was very cool to get to see him again. But that was an amazing movie for me to work on. That was my third film, and it was the first film with like all these veteran actors, like,
Yep.
and great actors that I respect, you know. Like I was like, I can't believe I'm in a movie with Cesar Romero, you know what I mean?
Wow.
I was completely starstruck, you know. um but you know, even, you know, Eleni Kazan, who at that time it wasn't is known for some of the things she is now, like My Big Fat Greek Wedding, but she was a Broadway star, you know.
Wow.
And then somebody as unique as a Divine, who now is like was so far ahead of the curve, right? Like Divine would be coming into her own right now, right? Like
Oh,
she'd have her own series now.
for sure. For sure.
And I mean, for sure, right? Like really. And but you know, Jeffrey Lewis, you know, who was not only in a, you know, a good series, I remember back in the day, that was funny, but he was also in the Any Which Way You Can and Any Which Way But Loose. And I
Yep.
thought he was, you know, just hilarious. Like I ended up staying. I worked for 2 weeks and I stayed for 2 weeks. One, because I thought Santa Fe, New Mexico was so amazing, but two, I said I want to watch these guys because, like, you know, these are some really, you know, Henry Silva, who was like in you know, was in Viva Zapata, you know what I mean? I was just like, oh my god, like these are like real, because those are the guys I wanted to be, right? I wanted to be these veteran character actors that were around for 40 years. So I was there sucking up everything I could learn from those guys, and it was a great experience. And you know, amazingly, here I am, all these years later, talking about it, right?
Was it a pretty professional set then? Was it one of those a set that you learned a lot from?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. No, I mean, just watching pros work, you know, you can you learn a lot from watching pros work. Like when I've had, you know, jumping back to music, you know, one of the things we didn't talk about was I worked on this project, Dreams of the Witch House, you know, working with some amazing people like Doug Blair and like Dot, these amazing metal guitar players and stuff. From, you know, he's a guitar player from Wasp. Watching those guys in the studio was like a real lesson for me, how prepared he would be when he came in there and how much ground he would cover and how fast he would cover it. I'm just like, you know, you sort of, you know, I should know better as an actor. You come in prepared, but to watch musicians do the same thing, you see what a pro is, and you see that, you know, you put that time in before you get in the studio so that you're prepared, you know?
Now transitioning to I guess Back to the Future, uh and I find this so interesting because your role was not very big, but man, it was a key role. Like how cool is it when you don't have the biggest part, but the part that you have, like everyone remembers? Because you could be in a throwaway scene and nobody remember, but everybody remembers who gets, you know, beat up by Crispin Glover.
Right. It is a pivotal moment, which is nice. And, you know, I'm just forever grateful to be associated with one of the biggest trilogies in Hollywood history, right? I mean, financially speaking, for sure. And it's always on television. That and Sweet Home Alabama are always on television. But it ended up, for me, the most unique story about the whole situation, and it's one I've told many times, but, you know, Eric Stoltz was originally cast in the lead of Marty, and he got let go because they just didn't think he was funny enough, though I think Eric Stoltz was a wonderful actor. Um, and in that transition, I had been what they call drop picked up already. In other words, I was on a daily payroll they could do nothing about, and they didn't realize it till about 5 weeks in. So even though we had told them, so I got paid for an extra like 4 or 5 weeks on that project that then went on to be one of the biggest grossing films in Hollywood history. I'll tell you, those residual checks, many times when things were slow and the rent needed to get paid, one of those checks would show up and save me arse. So I'm forever grateful to Back to the Future, man.
That is awesome. What was that like? Was it ever in flux when they fired Eric Stoltz? Did you ever think, oh, this might not actually happen, or were you assured that, hey, the project's still going, we're just finding somebody new to play Marty?
No, pretty quickly what was happening here. I mean, they had made a decision, and it was, it was a Spielberg film, and it wasn't going to just go away. You know what I mean? They had some, some studio money behind them and such. But like I said, it ended up just being to my great advantage. And the other thing that was fun for me on this project, so the first thing I ever did was a project called The Orkley Kid, and it stars Crispin Glover. And wait to hear this story. So I come to this. It was an AFI film, American Film Institute project.
Okay.
A short. And so I come in and I got my long hair, and he's like, "Okay, you're smoking in the boys' room. Just you go." And so like me and this guy are improvising and smoking in the boys' room. The bathroom door of the it's in the high school like bathroom. The bathroom door opens, and it's Crispin Glover dressed in the black outfit of Olivia Newton-John. And he's doing like I never seen Chris before. And he's doing the hey, how's it going, fellas? And I'm watching him going, number one, this is really bizarre, but number two, this actor's incredible. Who is this dude? Wow. His subtext is like ridiculous. So it was so great to have done that first, and then when I got the role, Crispin was showed right up to my trailer and knocked on the door and welcomed me to set, and that goes a long way when you know somebody that's one of the bigger roles and is welcoming, so that was awesome. And I've always been a Crispin Glover fan for sure. I think he's a singularly unique actor.
For sure. Yeah, no, and I think everybody will remember him from Letterman, but yeah, that's wild. But yeah, that's something I think people remember him from. But if you watch some of his movies, he's so talented.
He scared David that day, and then when he went back on, it was even worse because he went on to like apologize. Yep. Then he just kept going like, well, Dave, what did you think? It just made him look crazy, and I was just like, oh, Crispin, dude, what are you doing? What are you doing, man? But that's just how creative he was. He didn't want to go on there and just be himself talking about his movies. He thought that was boring, so he created these characters. Awesome. He did one on Johnny Carson too, and Johnny Carson picked right up on it and rolled with it, and it was great. But it was a much more subdued character than the one he came on Letterman with. But yeah, Crispin is a very, very creative individual.
That's awesome. Hey, we're gonna play 3 songs quick from Back to the Future. We got Back in Time from Huey Lewis and the News.
Nice.
Power of Love from Huey Lewis and the News, of course. But the one I really enjoy and people don't really know is Time Bomb Town by Lindsey Buckingham. It's from the scene when Marty McFly answers the phone and there's this really weird offbeat sound. And that's the song. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but
no, but that sounds like a Lindsey Buckingham kind of thing to do. Very cool.
It does. We'll play these 3 and be right back with the great Courtney Gains, and we'll talk Can't Buy Me Love, and I can't wait. So we'll be right back on the 80s at 8. We're back with Courtney Gains, just a great actor and also a musician, as we heard a song earlier today. And Courtney, it's now time, and this is kind of a joke, tongue-in-cheek, but it's now time to talk about your Gerardo phase. You had 3 movies in a row that you played with Mr. Rico Suave. And I need to know. I need to know what that was like.
Well, it was actually interesting. I think the most interesting thing to say now, though, is that Gerardo was definitely Mr. Rico Suave at that time. He is now a preacher out in Orange County, Los Angeles. He preaches at a church. I would have never seen that coming. Good for him. Very cool.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah. So he's grown up. But yeah, we did 3 movies in a row together. The first one was a motorcycle movie called Winners Take All, and then we did Can't Buy Me Love, and we shot that in Tucson, Arizona. And while we were doing that, he knew, by that point we knew each other, and he'd grown up in Tough Neighbors. He grew up as a pop locker initially, and that's how he got into acting. Good looking guy, and he could dance. And he knew that I grew up in Tough Neighbors in LA, and he got the script to colors, and he's like, "You're not going to believe it, man. They're doing a gang movie, and in the gang I'm in, the role I'm going up for is this role, Bird. There's a white boy in the gang, dude. You got to get in on this." And I immediately I immediately called my manager. Again, his name was Virgil Fry, Soleil Moon Fry, Punky Brewster's father, by the way.
That's so cool.
And he knew Dennis Hopper very well. He helped him make Easy Rider,
Yep.
and so that was a direct in. And so he called him and he said, "Hey, this is my number one student, and now I manage him. He's doing very well." And they were having trouble finding that role, obviously. And so I literally, as soon as I flew back in, literally the next day, I was in a meeting with Dennis, and just took a meeting and talked to him. He's like, "You understand this stuff, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I grew up in this stuff," and they just gave me the job. So I was so
Wow.
excited to represent, because I did know there was white boys in the gangs. I always tell the story. There was a guy that I went to grammar school with named Billy Red, who was in a gang in my neighborhood. And I always thought, this movie's got to blow his mind when he sees me basically playing him. He's
Wow.
got to be like, "Wait a minute, I never thought I'd see a redheaded gangbanger in a movie."
Wow. Yeah, and that Robert Duvall's performance to me is so powerful in that movie. And what a cast. I mean, you got Damon Wayans, of course, you got
Yeah.
Sean Penn, but like at the time, I don't think many people knew Don Cheadle, but Don Cheadle's a great actor in his own right.
No,
So I
that
mean,
was
what?
that was Don Cheadle's big break.
Yeah, and then Mario Lopez. I mean, what a cast.
Yeah, yeah. Mario was just a kid. So
Yeah.
yeah, so no, a lot of people have come out of that movie. A lot of people. And Trinidad Silva was awesome. Unfortunately, he passed away right before the movie came out. I thought his career was about to blow up playing Frog. I thought he was fantastic. But Duvall, yeah, I mean Duvall to me, I mean I think Sean Penn's the best actor of my generation. Like method actor, which is the kind of stuff I like, and Duvall to me is one of the best of his generation. And to get to watch him work in that death scene, I was right there. I was within 6 feet. Is still the greatest piece of acting I've ever been, in the presence of. It was just a phenomenal piece of work.
Wow. Wow. What a special. That's got to just be a career changing experience.
Well, you learn from the veterans. The way he handled himself on that set was the first thing he did, because of course he was the big name, him and Sean, but him as the veteran actor. We had this big table read in East Los Angeles. Why they decided to do that, I guess, to be gritty and be like where the gangs are. And it was at this theater, maybe, I don't know, 60 actors, 70 actors. I think I'm like the 75th character on the call sheet list, which is just crazy. And Robert Duvall was right at the front door, shaking everyone's hand and introducing himself. And I thought it was so brilliant because, of course, everyone's going to want to meet Robert Duvall. So he just got it out of the way so we could all just get to work. And it just
Wow.
showed you his veteran savvy in my mind, you know?
That's amazing.
Yeah, really class act.
I'm sure when you have somebody like that, then the rest of the cast just follows.
Yeah, exactly. The leads set the tone, right? So the only thing that was going on with Sean at that point was he was married to Madonna and he hated cameramen. So like if a photographer tried to come on set and shoot pictures of him, he'd fucking go nuts. I don't know if I can say the F word, sorry, but that's what
No,
would happen. And just bleep it out.
yeah, because we're going to talk about shitting on houses in a second anyway. So
Okay, good. Okay, good. But yeah, that was the only. But otherwise, Shaw was very cool, and he. There's a guy in the movie that you'll see by him, particularly in that scene where I'm on Angel Dust, who has a mustache and has a hair very similar to Sean's, and he's the guy who says he's dusted. That guy was who Sean rode, who was a real police officer who Sean rode around with in the real crash units for like months to kind of get a feel for the whole thing. So, as a method actor, he puts in his time and it shows.
you bet. Sorry, we're going to go backwards, and if we could talk about "Can't Buy Me Love" for a second, how?
Can't buy me love.
Oh my gosh! And what was the original title? Because there was a different title, correct?
Boy Meets Girl.
And it was a completely different kind of movie, right?
Well, it was the company that we did the movie Winners Take All for, Apollo Pictures. That was their second film. And so, yeah, they were an independent film company, and they made the movie. And Touchstone, which was it was a startup division of Disney, was looking for material, looking for summer movies, and they picked it up. And so when they picked it up, we went back and did I don't know if it was a week of reshoots or 4 days of reshoots where they sort of cut out all the tasteless humor, which was good, made it a less of a B movie, and then paid up big time for the title track. I think it was like $250,000 for that song, and then for the title track. But that all of that made all the difference, right? It made it a much classier project, and it ended up being the number 3 movie of the summer, which by today's standards would have broke everybody. If you had a number 3 movie of the summer, I mean that's just huge, But that was before tentpole movies. Yeah, so the Disney getting behind it, Touchstone made all the difference to make it a much classier project. And talk about a movie that had impact. I had somebody come up to me one time and say, I was a football jock in high school, and I was looking forward to hazing the freshmen. And that summer, I saw that movie, and then I couldn't do it anymore.
Wow. How
And I was like, wow, like wow.
what does that mean to you? I mean, that you impacted somebody, even a silly comedy like that some people would call silly comedy, impacted somebody's life. That's got to make you feel good as an actor.
Well, what it does, and certainly Children of the Corn with the huge response that got for me. I mean, the people would like kids would be crying to their mother when they'd see me on the street. I started to realize how powerful cinema is, the impact of cinema, and don't take that lightly, And a romantic comedy, a teen romantic comedy. The message still got to this jock going into his senior year to not do harm to the nerds. Awesome.
That's so cool. How different was it when they reshot that movie? I mean, was it quite a bit? Was it drastically different, or what? Do you think it was pretty similar? What was your kind of take?
It wasn't drastically different. It was just cleaning up some of the more tasteless B movie type jokes. I couldn't really give you an example now. It's been so long. But Steve Rash, who directed it, I was also I would work with that guy again any day. He directed the Buddy Holly story.
And what a great movie.
Oh, love that movie. And that was definitely a low budget movie that he, as a director, made a movie that was more than that. You know what I mean? But there was not a big budget. And I give him a lot of credit for my most, impactful moment. So, the movie was, the script was like, a B maybe. And by going back and doing some rewrites and cleaning up the stuff, it took it to, a more of an A-level script. And one of the things we did was the big famous line, right? But at that point, Steve Rash had faith in me and such. And we went into Patrick Dempsey's trailer to like discuss the scene. And he's like, well, what do you think? And I had this long monologue that said, like, you are my friend. I did it for free, that kind of stuff. I don't like that kind of stuff. I don't like what I call purple prose or too much explaining, right?
Yep.
I said, I don't want to do any of this. He says, well, what do you want to do? I said, I want to just jack him against the arcade and tell him you shit on my house. That's it.
No way.
And he's like, okay, let's do that. And that's what we did.
Wow. And I love it how it almost feels like an acting project or an actor's exercise where you say it 3 times, but it's so effective because you say
right.
It
became what's known as a repetition. Yeah, we both did, and it was just because I didn't think about it. I was just literally unconscious at that point. You know what I mean? And it just happened that way. That we just that's all there was to be said. And we just kept saying it. It was. Oh, and I want to tell a story about that because so the producer of the movie. His name is Jerry Henshaw, and he was a very large man, and he had a very storied history. I mean, he'd been in Hollywood for years and years and years. He came on the Burbs set, and he told me, he said, so when the movie, we sold it to Touchstone, we went and took a meeting with the Suits and a bunch of young guys, and they were like, we don't think that scene is too heavy. We don't think it should be in the movie.
Wow.
And Jerry said, I got up, and I started pounding on the desk, and I said, you are not taking that bleeping scene out of my bleeping movie. Do you understand me?
That's awesome.
And they said, oh, okay. And, it again, in a light romantic comedy, this moment was something more than that. And I'm just, I'm thankful to Steve Rash for letting me do what I wanted with that scene. And I'm thankful to Jerry Henshaw for standing up and not letting it get cut out.
Wow. That's an amazing story. Anything else about either the cast or what that was did you enjoy making that movie? I mean, I'm sure you enjoy making every movie, but did you feel at that time like it was something that would be special and people would enjoy?
I did enjoy making the movie, and like I said, working with Steve Rash, a director I admired, was goes a long way. So when we got to go do the reshoots and Disney had picked it up, everybody got very excited. Like we knew we were on to something. Would I have thought that it was going to be the #3 movie of the summer? No, I couldn't have dreamt that high. But yeah, at that point, we really knew we were on to something special. So it was a great experience.
So now we're going to play two songs from the movie. Neither that are really well known, but songs that I enjoy. One is "One for the Mockingbird" by Cutting Crew, and the other is the big African Anteater dance song by Randy Hall. And was he there? He was the one singing the song during the like actually at the dance, I think, right?
I didn't know that. That's trivia I did not know.
Okay, but at least in the movie, it looked like the same guy who his name is Randy Hall. He had a couple R&B hits in the 1980s, and the
Oh
song is
wow.
All Night Long. Let's give it a listen, and then we'll be right back and kind of wrap things up if that's okay.
Yes, sir.
Sounds good. We'll be right back with Courtney Gains. And now we are back with Courtney Gains, amazing actor. We also heard he's a great musician. We heard from his EP earlier today. And just to wrap up the 80s, let's talk about the Burbs, my man. We
There you
already
go.
talked about Colors. And Burbs is another movie that I don't think you might not have realized how big it was until later on. Because, man, when I talk to people, there are some people that really, really love this movie, and I enjoy it too. I think it's so funny.
Yeah, there is some serious Burbs diehard fans out there. And no, I didn't know until I started doing conventions because sort of from the perspective of Universal, so when we were making the Burbs is when Big came out, which was just a hugely successful film.
Yeah.
So that was the next movie to come out after Big. So comparatively, they were disappointed, right? So that was sort of how it was left, that it wasn't as big as Big. But like, how many movies are as big as Big? But so that's how it was left, though. That was sort of the energy about it. It really wasn't until I started doing conventions about 15 years ago that I came with just like some Children of the Corn pictures, horror convention. I thought that's all they're going to want. And everybody just kept coming up going, "Where's your Burbs picture? Where's your Burbs picture?" And I was like, "Huh?" And so I started, making Burbs pictures, and that's still my #2 seller behind Children of the Corn at conventions to this day. But so many people, shared these stories, and one of the things I found out was like this movie is like a linchpin movie for families, like kids who might be like say into horror or a little quirky like that. Like it's a movie they could actually watch with their parents,
Yep.
that their parents would actually enjoy with them. So it actually created family time, and then now those guys have passed it on to their kids, and like we're like 3 generations in of like Burbs fans. It's kind of crazy.
That's amazing. And I got to ask, everyone that has talked about Tom Hanks just says he's super workmanlike. Did you find him to be professional
No,
and
no.
workmanlike?
I say this all the time, and I stand by it. Tom Hanks is the most down to earth A-list actor you'll ever meet, and I gotta say, it seems like there's a lot of people trolling him online now, saying he's part of this, that, or the other. I don't buy it. I don't buy any of it. Like whatever, like left wing, right wing conspiracy BS people want to say. I don't buy it. This guy, he's a guy from Sacramento, man. He's not, that he still talks about building theater sets in high school. Like this is the kind of stuff he relishes. You know what I mean? He's as down to earth A-list actor that I've ever met. He's just not. He's just not, buying the hype. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And
And
he
did you
created
find
a
him?
very
Oh,
good atmosphere on set because you don't have when you have somebody like that as your lead actor, nobody can be acting like too wanky. You know what I mean?
you bet. And I've just heard he's very professional.
Yeah, he's more than that. I mean, he really is. He's really more than that. And he's what really comes across to me with Tom Hanks is he's just the personification of Americana. Like that's why you see that his playtone stuff that he makes is always very Americana, whether it's about World War II or about going to space. Like that was the era he came up in, and that's the era that matters to him. Like I'll give you an example. Like on set, he would sit there, a little cigar in his hand, perhaps, but with a transistor radio listening to baseball games.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Like he could be like, get me a TV out here. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? And they would be like, yes, Mr. Hanks, but he's not like that. He would rather sit there listening to it on a radio because that's so much more Americana. You know what I'm saying?
that's that's exactly what I want to hear about Tom Hanks. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
And I'll tell you, I mean, but like beyond that, like, he was very encouraging to me after seeing the film. And he was like, if there's anything you could ever do, he let me know. And I had a film that I helped produce called Dorm Days that he had just sold Big Fat Greek Wedding to this company. And he had one of his people come down, like his number 3 guy, come down, see the movie. And then they took it to that company for me. And I'm telling you, I don't hang out with Tom Hanks a lot. He did more for me than, like that than most people do for me that are like my managers or whatever. Like he
wow.
actually tried to help me get a film sold. And and I'll tell you one more thing. So I auditioned for a Band of Brothers. He was in the office, which is enough. I mean, the guy's making, he was, making, he's always working, but not only was he in the office, he actually read the audition with me, which
So cool.
no actor that big does anything like that. And it was
Wow.
so awesome because it just ups your game. Because one, he's good, so he's good. You're going to have something to work off of. But two, you're like, I'm working with Tom Hanks. There's no way I'm going to not bring my A game right now. You know what I mean?
Wow.
So that tells you a lot about who he is, at least in my opinion, in my humble opinion.
So cool. And lastly, I got to ask, what was it like to be around Bruce Dern?
The
He's,
best.
oh,
So
cool.
so so I'm a big Bruce Dern fan.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think I think Bruce Dern plays the son of a bitch better than anybody else.
I
Like
mean, I moved to Nebraska just because of the movie. Not really, but
he is. I
he's
mean,
so good.
I don't know. I forgot who won the Oscar that year, but it should have been him. He was fantastic in that movie,
He
man.
deserved it. He's so good.
Well, he certainly deserved at least a nomination. Like I said, I forgot who won, but when I finally saw the film, because I'm not somebody who always keeps up on things, I was like, my God, he's just like he doesn't have a bad moment in this movie. He's just fantastic. But yeah, so he really, I was already a big fan, and after the trash can scene, he came up to me and he would just call me by my character's name. He's like, Hans, that was really good work, Hans. And he took me under his wing, and he's from the studio, actor studio, so very method. Me too. And my character was a very lost character, and I was feeling kind of lost too. That's what happens sometimes is you start to emulate the emotions you're creating with the character. And to have somebody like him start to recognize my work and tell me you're on the right path with what you're doing here, keep going there, meant the world to me and gave me a ton of confidence. But he really did take me under his wing, and he really gave me some sound advice. And a few years ago, I got to do another movie with him, movie that went straight to Tubi called Hellblazer. But 70-year-old Bruce Dern, and I got to again thank him for how much it meant to me. And we had a scene together, and he improvs free flow consciousness. He just says what he sees, and it's kind of a genius gift he has. And that guy at 70 just ran circles around me. He just dusted me. Like his brain is so fast. He's just clicking off ideas at you. You just can't keep up with them. He's a very intelligent, very interesting man.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because sometimes you see scenes like that and you think, even at this point, and you're like, oh, is that all written? And people say, no, he's still that sharp.
Yeah, well, it's also just the way he works. He does, but what he does, the free associations he does, they're good. Like, right, they're not not good. They're not like, oh God, this is just like a waste of our time. Well, even like the line, "Hey Pinocchio, where are you going?" That was his.
Wow.
But look at what he saw. If he saw this guy in the leader hoses and the jacket and the hat, and it's a great line. But yeah, no, that was all Bruce Dern.
Awesome. Wow. That's I'm just glad you had that experience in that movie because those two, Tom Hanks and Bruce Dern, and the fact that they were both so positive, that's awesome.
Well, hey man, but like Carrie Fisher too, right? Like I'm looking at everybody going, like I'm trying to be a guy who's a stranger in a strange land, and everybody I'm looking at is people I grew up watching.
Oh my gosh.
Like from like my childhood. It was really like I got to shake this off. I don't know these people in any way. And then to get to work with Henry Gibson too, man. I mean, Henry Gibson, all the way from Laughing to the Blues Brothers, man. I mean, like
Wow.
serious stuff. And he couldn't have been a nicer guy. So no, it was it was pretty special. And, interestingly enough, the writer's strike just ended, but the actor's strike isn't over yet, but I think it's going to be soon. But in 1988, there was a writer's strike when we shot that movie. It was us and Fletch 2 on the entire Universal lot. It was a ghost town. And I was too young to realize how lucky I was. I was young and I was like, oh, I'm working. I've been working. I don't know, but yeah, I didn't realize people I was too young to realize people had, children to feed and mortgages to pay that I'm much more aware of this time around.
Interesting that we're right back. We're talking 30 years and we're right back at that. 35 years because I'm born in 1988, so 35 years and we're still having that. That's interesting.
Well, yeah, no, these in these 2 30-year periods were the two big fights. So that one was, and I didn't understand at the time, but that was about residual income for stuff screening on television.
Yeah.
Movies that were now on television, and that's made a huge difference in the 30 years of my life. Like I said, I mean, the residual income I get from, movies like Sweet Home Alabama and Back to the Future, which are, the good ones, are because those things are always on television. That's Absolutely. Why. So if those people had not fought for me in 1988, it made it possible for me to get this far. So now here we are, this next generation, in a theory, fighting for this next generation, with the streaming services, which is like, could be the kiss of death, man, just like it was to the music industry. But it seems like hopefully they're going to come up with an equitable deal. And, at least if they're going to use AI in the future, which is inevitable, yep. But at least we get paid for it. If someone's going to use my voice or use my likeness, pay me for it. That's all.
Absolutely. Last thing in the 80s I want to talk about, even though it's not, but since the fact that you did film in the 80s, I just want to touch on Memphis Belle before you say goodbye. That huge ensemble cast, and just watching it, you can tell there's a $23 million budget. That movie looks really, really good. What was that like? Did it feel like a big film while it was filming?
Yes. It was the film to get for a young actor that year. Any and every actor, much bigger actors than myself, wanted that movie. That was the movie to get, but they made a conscious decision to not have everybody recognizable. They made a conscious decision to have 3 different pay tiers. So I got in on the low end pay tier because it was an ensemble. They couldn't afford to pay all stars, I guess. So that was the choice. So they wanted to put it into the movie, into the budget of the movie, a period piece and all of that. So, I tell straight to, if you can come up with an angle in an audition to leave an impact that's beyond just the audition itself, I advise how to, to do that. And so what I knew going into that audition was this was an ensemble film. So they were, in my mind, they were looking for ensemble actors. So when I walked in the door, the director, Michael Caton Jones, goes, "How you doing?" And I said, "Ensemble is my forte." I said, "I'm in one of the best theater ensemble companies in Los Angeles. We just won a bunch of Dramalog awards for this play and that play." And he was like, "Well, that was really refreshing." He's like, "No one ever says that." He goes, "Actors in New York want to know about the script." He goes, "In LA, they want to know about what's the part for them." He goes, "So that was really refreshing. The audition I did was okay, but then luckily they looked at Pachter Dempsey's tape, and that scene, the famous scene, was in it."
No way.
And that's Michael Caton Jones telling me. He said that was the linchpin that got you the job. Wow. So thank you, Pachter Dempsey, for having me on your tape.
That's amazing.
But so that was the process of getting the job. Now you get to go to the UK and you get to be there, 3 months, which is the longest I've ever been on a project. You got to work at Pinewood Studios, which is, one of the most famous studios in the world. And their commissary is like, LA commissary is really average. Their commissary is like going to have Sunday brunch every day. It's just awesome. So everything about it was just top notch. And, when I talk to the other actors and run into them and this and that, we all say we've been chasing a movie, an experience as good as that the rest of our lives.
That's cool. And what a cast.
Oh, great cast, but not just great cast. There's 4 Oscar winners on that movie. You got the set designer is a guy named Stuart Craig, who basically does every good movie in England still to this day. David Watkins was the cinematographer who won an Oscar for Out of Africa. David Putnam, the producer, for Chariots of Fire, and the editor. It was like, you were in like some of the best people in England were on this movie working on it. You know what I mean? It was just, you just don't get that every day. So I certainly haven't. Let's put it that way. So to just be with that great of ensemble of young actors plus that, wow, and that's why you get a movie that looks that good, you know.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And it is it's a movie that I think timing for whatever reason it didn't hit as well as people wanted, but
It
I
was
love
it was
it.
it
Still
was
holds up.
it came out during the first Iraq War. The timing couldn't have been worse.
Wow.
Yeah, so like the two big movies coming out of Warner Brothers at that time were Memphis Belle and Goodfellas.
Okay.
And which one killed? Made Ray Liotta a star, that's for sure. But yeah, the timing was awful, and it definitely hurt the box office because the anticipation was the war was going to go on for a long time, like the second one did. So yeah, no one, people didn't want to go see a war movie during a war. So that the timing of it was very, very unfortunate. But the movie holds up, and it
It
certainly did
does,
well later in cable and rentals. But it's a movie, regardless, that I think all of us are very proud of.
for sure. Well, Courtney Gaines, is there anything else you want to get out to our listeners? I will talk about your social media and we'll go back to your album, but anything else you want the listeners in North Dakota to know about you or your
Yeah,
career?
just a couple of the latest things because I think they're actually worth mentioning. One is I have a movie out that just came out like a month ago called The Wrath of Becky
Oh, cool.
that got in South by Southwest this year. So that was very cool. And it's a sequel to a movie called Becky that came out in 2020, sort of became a drive-in classic during the pandemic. And now they're doing a third. And it's a sort of actiony, revengey type thing. I'd grown out a big beard, knowing that these Proud Boy type roles were going to come, and that's exactly what happened. And we're called the Noblemen. I actually
Wow.
play banjo in it, sing a very racist song, but it's a very entertaining film. I think it's come out very good. I recommend it.
And where
And
can
then
people find that?
at this point, you can find it on Amazon and Hulu and all that stuff. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
wherever you rent VOD now, it's there. But it's a good fun if you like action and blood and guts and stuff like revenge type stuff with a young girl doing it. This is the movie for you. So I recommend that. And my character's name's Twig, and he's like a guy who's spent way too much time on 4chan about what women do to men and all that kind of stuff. Very,
Interesting.
very, very fun in that regard.
Interesting.
Um, and the other thing I did last year the first part came out in December and the second part came out in March. I went and did a video game for Rockstar, and they keep it very secret, and they would not tell me what I was doing. And some people were like, "It might be GTA," but like no one was sure, and it was. It was Grand Theft Auto Los Santos Drug Wars, which is their online project. And
Wow.
I play this character named Lab Rat, who's the guy that makes all the acid, and I say it's my ode to Dennis Hopper, basically. It's a freaking great character, and you can see what they call the uncut scenes or whatever they call it. You can find them online, and this character Labrat's just a hoot. So I'm really happy with these last two projects I did, and I'm really happy with the characters themselves. So I like talking about them. And I recommend people check them out.
Wow. And just quick question, what's it like to play in a video game, to use your voice for a video game?
Well, it's really a lot more than using your voice. And I've done three now, and all of them have been pretty special projects actually. Even though I'm not like a big video game person myself, the first one was a thing called Wing Commander 3, which was the first one to ever use people. It was the first one they had enough RAM to use people. They even spun a movie called Wing Commander 3 years later because they did super well. And then the second one I did was partially put together by Rockstar called L.A. Noir, and that was about L.A. in the 1940s, and that was the first time they ever used facial recognition, which was extremely painful. You had to sit in this room with 100 cameras around you, just close-ups on your face, and you had to do one line at a time. It was so painfully slow. And now it's evolved into where you're in the bubble suit doing the movement, but they just have a camera on your head, almost like a football face guard, where there's a little camera looking at you, and that's how they get all the facial recognition. So you're doing it in real time along with all your movement, and that's really cool. Like it's a lot more than just doing a voiceover. You're actually acting with all these other cast, all in these bubble suits, these ridiculous bubble suits. But it's kind of cool because it's like a uniform, like everyone's equal. You know what I
I
mean? Like we're all in it together and we're all making this happen. And it was very creative and very fun and very challenging. I
I,
had a great time doing it.
I had no idea. That's awesome.
Yeah, you can look that stuff up online too. Like they'll show you like how they do it with like, and it's crazy. But the but it's come so far from LA Noir to now they just have the camera mounted right. It's weird because you feel this like this thing's going to jump on you. This little camera's right in your face, but it's so great that they're able to catch all that facial recognition and not sitting in some chair feeling isolated and not able to move because that's where the real spontaneity happens, you know?
Hey, Courtney, if people want to learn more about you, want to follow you, is there a website? What social media page would you
Yeah,
recommend they follow you?
sure. So I have a Courtney Gains Facebook page. I also have a Courtney Gains Instagram. I don't have the check on it. I'm not into all that stuff. You'll know it's me. There's pictures and things up there that no one else is going to be able to put up.
Yeah.
And then I also have a Facebook page for the Courtney Gains group, my band. So I have a band, like I said, I have a 3-piece band now that's been gigging in the Southeast for about 9 months, gearing up for going on the road. So, you can get paid out here to do like 3 sets a night at a bar and stuff. So it's like, doing the bar band thing and tightening up and getting tough so that we can go out and promote this record next year. So it's been great. But you can find the band Courtney Gains Group, and that's where we're going to be posting all the touring that we're going to try to put together next year and the like. So go check that out. You see just plenty of tapes of bits and pieces of live performances, and you'll see this is a real band. This is a real working band.
And lastly, again, if you want to find your EP, Safe Haven, where can people do that?
Yes, you go to Fake Fang Records, fakefangs.com, or you can certainly go on, again, my Facebook page. There's plenty of postings there of the link to go check it out. And again, you can hear that record 3 times for free. And if you like it, you can buy a download. If you want to spend another $1, you can get a CD. And if you get that by the 12th, you can get a personally signed CD. So for $8, can't beat that. Couple cups of coffee.
For sure. Well, Courtney, it has been just a true pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for your time and just congratulations on everything.
Thank you. Appreciate talking to you.